Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, depending on where you are in the world. I am Gareth Worthington, a volunteer for the BSFA, back with another interview with another awesome author here today. We have Philip Reeve. Super glad to have him here. Most of you will know him from his work, Mortal Engines, which was done as a gigantic movie with Peter Jackson back in 2018. But he's more than that, and had done work with like illustrations, stuff like that, and also on the stage as well, which I think is fantastic. And the Ministry of Biscuits is so British, and I love that idea, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that in just a second. But for those people know my interview process and with the other authors, I always start with a slightly off-kilter question with why do you write? All right, so and that's a strange one, but it changes, right? So when you started out writing, it might have been for one reason, and now later on in life, it's for a different reason. And I love to hear people's motivation for what it is that drives them to write a story, if you're comfortable with that.
Yes, I'm not sure I can answer it really. I've always written for as long as I can remember. I mean, from when I was like sort of 5 or 6 and first learned to write, I've always been writing stories of my own. I guess because I just liked stories, really. I just, I sort of grew up, I read a lot and I watched lots of telly and I like comics and stuff. So I was just always trying to um, sort of recapture the feeling that I got from reading stories by inventing my own. So that's sort of what kept me at it all the way through my kind of school days and college years. And then in my 20s, I buckled down and wrote the book that became Mortal Engines.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I guess it turned into a job. So that's why I write now. It's because that's what keeps a roof over my head. But it's still basically kind of the same thing of wanting to create stories.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, and as I mentioned before, you actually even, got into publishing, you were doing stuff for stage, the musical comedy Ministry of Biscuits. I just have to ask, please tell me a bit more about that because it sounds awesome.
Oh, that was actually written around about the same time as Mortal Engines. And it's I have a friend in Brighton, Brian Mitchell, who's he's a very good playwright and also a composer, trained composer, and he usually writes with another writer, Joseph Nixon. But we got together and did Ministry of Biscuits, which was it's like 1984 with biscuits. Basically, it's a kind of alternative post-war Britain where the idea of biscuits or the types of biscuits you're allowed is very ruthlessly controlled by an authoritarian government. And Brian sort of scored lots of songs about this in a sort of British like classical kind of way. So it felt very period. It felt very much of that sort of 40s, 50s time. So it was like a sort of demented Ealing comedy kind of thing. And it sort of toured a couple of times and went up to Edinburgh and things. I mean, so it's quite small scale, but it was very much liked by people who saw it. We had a follow-up with Lord God, which is about God taking a holiday in a little seaside resort in the 1920s, which was very sort of PG Woodhouse. We tour them when we can, but it's increasingly expensive to try and tour little shows. So I think Brian's been reduced, well, not reduced, but he's sort of concentrating more on two-handers nowadays.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I don't suppose it stemmed from some kind of authority of what biscuits were allowed in your house when you were a kid, like no bourbon.
No, not at all. No, it's just very little of my stuff comes from any sort of personal background. It's just whatever sort of takes my interest. I find funny, really.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, Mortal Engines came out in 2001, I believe, when it was first published. So, we're more than 20 years later. And now we're at your latest book, Thunder City, which is a kind of return to that entire world. But as I understand, it's a standalone within that world. So beyond the synopsis, because anybody can read the synopsis, what would you like people to take away from that book? Like when they finish reading it and they put it down, what is it you'd like them to take away from that?
What from the new one? I think basically just I hope they'll have been sort of entertained. There it is. It's quite long by the sounds of one of my books, and I hope it's packed with adventure and strange ideas. And I don't really have some great message to put across or anything like that. And I don't really like books that try to do that. So I just try and make it as entertaining as possible. I kind of try and keep myself turning the pages when I'm writing, and then hopefully that will have the same effect on other people when they come to read it. so yeah, and it's I started writing Mortal Engines sort of probably at the end of the 80s. Really, it took me the whole of the 90s to kind of put it together and find a publisher and stuff for it. So it's really quite ancient history for me. It was quite strange going back to it, and for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been off doing different stuff. I sort of gave up on this work. I've been writing, consciously trying to do different things. So it's quite interesting to come back to it.
Are there any threads? So obviously you've got a loyal fan base for Mortal Engines. Are there any without giving away spoilers, are there any threads there, things that people can look forward to that they kind of, I won't call it fan service, but I'll say it's, that people will be like, oh great, that's in here.
Yeah, I've tried to avoid that because I think that's sort of a pitfall that you can fall into, right? Especially writing prequels. This one is set about a century before Mortal Engines. So it's a prequel, but it's the reason it's set that far before is that the world is pretty much the same. All the things people want from the Mortal Engines world will be in there. There are motorized cities and airships and things. But none of the characters has been born yet, and can't be really. Even I hope I'll be doing more, sequels to this. I'd like it to start a new series, really, but you won't be meeting any of the same people because I think that was just a trap I wanted to avoid. I wanted to sort of leave the stories of the previous books finished basically, and I wanted to sort of start new stories, but just use the same worlds as sort of backdrop.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And, I really like stories that do that when you get a prequel and you really understand, well, how did the world get there? A lot of these stories, we kind of start off with, this is your world, and you kind of, you take that as the assumption. So to delve into how it got there and, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's I did do some prequels way back. I did an initial 4 books in the Mortal Engines series, and then I wrote a book called Fever Crumb and a couple of sequels to that, which sort of go right back to the kind of the beginnings of that world and actually do show you how it falls into place. Whereas this one is much more about just going, oh yes, this is cool. We're going to have another swashbuckling adventure story in it. And you find out a few little new things about it, but there's not that much new to say really, because I think I kind of explored it quite extensively in the first 4 books. The reason there are 4 books is because that was how much I thought it took to sort of investigate it all. So now it's more like, in a way it's more like writing a historical novel now. I kind of know what the world is like and what can happen there, and I just kind of set my characters running and see where they end up. Well, that's quite satisfying, I think.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to kind of like your writing process, because I'm given to understand you don't have one. So you start with well, like, I have an idea, this is the beginning, this is the end, and I'm just going to run with it. And is that still true now? Is that kind of how you like to write?
Yeah, kind of. I don't really usually know what the end is. I kind of generally have a few. I sort of kind of have like an idea and a beginning and a few sort of vague inklings of things that might happen in the middle somewhere that I sort of aim towards. And I think, yes, it'd be nice if I could fit those in somewhere. Yeah. And then when I kind of tinker around and write things and throw things away. And eventually, when I've got about sort of 2/3 of a book, then I start to see what the ending's going to be, and then I kind of work my way towards that. And then I go back and rewrite it all and try and tidy it up and make it feel as if it was all planned. But it's very scrappy. It's a very scrappy kind of process.
No, but that's definitely interesting. I hear different methodologies. My own is I kind of have my own skeleton and I write and then I change it, as you say, as I go along. But I'm a person that needs a bit of structure. But does that mean for you like the characters almost run the story because you set them off and then they do stuff and then like, oh well, then that's going to change how the story goes because they've let it off here?
I guess it's sort of tempting to say that, but it's it is a genre novel, and in genre novels the characters don't really run things. It's more about sort of ideas. It's more about a cool new idea arises, and then you sort of fit that in somehow. But the characters do have an effect because I don't usually know who they're going to be when I start writing. So a lot of it is finding out sort of who wanders in and wants to be involved in the story.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. I love hearing how people get to their stories and how they put them together. So everyone's very, very different. So this book comes out
next week.
I'm sorry. I was
the 26th, I think. Yes. just about ready.
So does that mean then, with that one on the horizon to be released, what are you working on in the background? My assumption is going to be that you're already working on something new, or are you kind of giving it a rest for a second?
No, I'm already. I write books for younger children with an illustrator friend of mine, Sarah McIntyre. We sort of work as co-authors and do the text together, and we're kind of constantly firing those out. They're very short. The Adventure Mice, the series is called. So we kind of have to put out any one of those every 6 months. So there's always one of those on the go. And I'm working on a follow-up to this, follow-up to Thunder City. So the next exciting installment. Although, I mean, I hope this. I try not to end with cliffhangers at all. I sort of want each book to be self-contained, partly because I think that's more pleasing, just sort of aesthetically, but also because you never really know these days where you're going to get picked up. So, but the second one is under contract. So yeah, I'm working on that.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good to know. And I mean, we've talked a bit about it, but you do a lot of other projects on the side, particularly for younger kids with the illustration side of things. Are you getting more into the digital media, the speed at which these kids pick it up? So I've got 2 kids of my own, and they pick stuff up way faster than I did as a kid. They're not waiting for another published book to come out. So are you kind of moving into digital space a bit with them?
No, not at all. I don't really understand that. I'm very much of the sort of pre-digital era. I'm sort of probably the last of the I grew up without. I don't think I had a computer until I was well into writing the Model Engine series. I was doing it on the electric typewriter. I'm just not really au fait with that stuff. So no, I just ignore it in the fake hope that it will go away. So no, I'm kind of writing. I write books is what I do, and
and to be fair, I force my children to pick up physical books. So I read the Mr. Men books with my kids because they're quite young. I dug them out of storage and make them pick up physical books. So it's definitely important. It's just given that you work with these younger kids, which is the question. Okay, so you've got
that. No, I mean it is a question, and you do sense that these things are becoming more and more old-fashioned. But I hope there's enough of a readership left, or enough people who like them still, or who will sort of come to like them. My son didn't read very much when he was a child at all at school, but as an adult, he's taken to it and working his way through the classics and things. So I think people come.
They do that. Everything's coming back. People are going back to vinyl. They're coming back to books. I feel like the digital thing is out there, but even ebooks, people are coming back to physical books. You're seeing more special copies now, and like sprayed edges and all this cool stuff they do with the books. And so yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So with that going on, and you've got your other bits and pieces going on, you're writing the sequel to Thunder City. Left field question. If you could write another genre, you're pretty broad anyway, but if you could write a completely different genre, what would you write?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've just finished a series, or I hope I'll come back to it, a series called Utterly Dark, which it's fantasy, but it's kind of set in sort of in our world. It's an imaginary island off the southwest English coast, and it's set in about 1810. So it's sort of a historical novel, magic poldark. That's how I described it when I first finished writing it. I do like historical novels, and I would sort of like to. I would like to write more of them, but it never seems to quite happen. And I make little films as a hobby as well. I've just made a Western, and that was quite fun. We're sort of in the middle of it. We've shot it, but it's got to be edited.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't read a lot of sci-fi or fantasy anymore. I tend to be much more just sort of literary novels or historical stuff. So really, that's sort of where my interest tends to go as a reader. But whenever I start writing anything, somehow or other, some kind of fantasy element tends to intrude, and that's all right. That allows you a certain freedom, I think.
No, I mean, I often hide this dirty secret, but I don't read so much fiction, but I read a lot of non-fiction. So I put that into weirdly, I start writing fiction. So I completely understand you. It's like 2 different things. That,
no, I think. I mean, I read lots of sort of history and biography and stuff, and that definitely very useful for. Mortal Engines is very much kind of sort of twisted and mixed up versions of historical goings on. Really, there's an awful lot. Always has been right back from the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with it coming out next week, are you on tour? Can people come and see you? Are you at any conventions, places? Where can people find you?
Yes, I'm at the London Comic Con in I think Friday the 25th of October, doing a thing there, and I'm at the Bath Children's Literature Festival on the sort of 1st or 2nd of October, I think.
Okay.
So yes, I'm sort of touring around a bit. I'm based in the southwest of England, so it's quite hard to, it takes a long time to get anywhere. So I do quite a lot of local stuff. I'll be at all my local bookshops and things, but I think those are the two main. I'm probably forgetting something. Oh, Marlborough, the Marlborough Literary Festival as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you're up at sort of Dartmoor area, right? So yes, it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
Well, yeah,
I remember it well.
Yeah, it's not too far from the nearest town, but the nearest town is a long way by train to London, so I kind of have to have a good reason to get.
Yeah. No, I'm a Janner born and bred from Plymouth, so I know Devon very well. Okay, and then just last one really to kind of wrap it up. So besides you touring around, if you just want to tell everybody your website so we can go find you and look at what you're doing, and that's okay.
Yeah, that would be good if I could remember it. I told you I was afraid.
I have your website here. Hang on.
Yes, you've got my website. It must be philipreeve.com or something.
It is philipreeve.com.
Yeah, sorry, I don't tend to. Yes, you'll find my blog there as well, and that's where I mostly update things. And but I'll be putting a little bit about the new book up there, but mostly it's just in the pages. That's where you'll find information about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for spending some minutes with me. Interesting to get to know you and just all the other stuff you do, right? So it's great you're with your new book, and it's great to hear about Mortal Engines, but all the other stuff you do with the Western and the kids things and the musicals, and man of many talents, and that's what I love to hear. So
I think you need a bit of hinterland, I think, as a writer. Otherwise, it just all gets a bit kind of, you just end up circling around the same ideas. So I think you need to kind of keep doing other stuff. And it keeps it fresh, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much. And we'll put all the details of your website and where you're going to be and your book release on the website. Thank you very much.